Breaking news, breaking right now. President Trump's back continuing resolution has passed the House of Representatives. It will cut $13 billion of non-defense spending. The post-millennial reports as following. Continuing resolution, spending bill backed by President Trump passed with a vote of 217 to 213. Not a single Democrat voted for it, meaning the Democrats would have shut down the government. It'll fund the government until September 30, 2025. It's a continuing resolution. The bill needed the overwhelming support of the Republicans in order to pass. They lost one Republican, Thomas Massie, who's basically a radical libertarian. I've often agreed with Massie, but what people need to understand, including him, is the word prudence. Prudence. There are times to vote no, and there are times to vote yes. This is all there is to push through the president's spending cuts, tax cuts, these other things that need to get done. There's really no way around it. Number in the House is such that only 2 members of the GOP can oppose the measure if all members are present to push forward. House Speaker Mike Johnson this morning said, we have to keep the government in operation. It's a fundamental responsibility of ours. J.D. Vance, who was there and spoke to them, echoed the sentiment. Let's see. President Trump focused on Massie, said Congressman Thomas Massie, there's an automatic vote of no on just about everything, despite the fact that he's always voted for continuing resolutions in the past. Actually, he hasn't. He's voted mostly against them. He should be primaried, and I will lead the charge against him. Just another grandstander who's too much trouble and not worth the fight. He wrote on Truth Social. Lawmakers have said the bill will cut $13 billion non-defense spending, as well as increase $6 billion for defense. The House Freedom Caucus, the conservatives, said its members would back the bill, adding it would reduce and then freeze spending for the next 6 months. Would reduce and then freeze spending for the next 6 months to allow President Trump and the administration to continue their critical work within the executive branch to find and eliminate waste, fraud, and abuse, which, my God, they're doing on steroids. The bill will now go to the Senate, and if passed there, will then go to the President. If signed, the government shutdown deadline coming on Friday will be avoided. Now, I'm predicting right now Murkowski will vote against this. Murkowski is a radical Democrat in barely Republican clothing. That's right. And with what's happening with the Department of Education, she's bought and paid for by the teachers' unions. People don't realize that she gets an enormous amount of support from them. She's bought and paid for. She's owned by them. And she is their reliable vote. So that's the second big story going on right now, breaking right now. As I speak, Department of Education faces up to, according to ABC News, 50% layoffs after the closure notice just went out. Reduction in force. Mass layoffs are expected to start tonight. The sources said the reduction in force notices are expected to go out 11 minutes ago. So they went out 11 minutes ago. Nearly half of the department is expected to be eliminated. That announcement came shortly after the Department of Education employees were told their offices would be closed for the day on Wednesday. I don't know how many are there in the first place. Let me tell you something. This was a boondoggle from day one. It was absolutely unnecessary. It was a bureaucracy, a payoff looking for a purpose. Education occurs at the state and local level, not at the federal level. We used to have a federal office of education and essentially oversaw the distribution of monies, Pell Grants, things of that sort, block grants to the states. When Reagan became president, he tried to get rid of it. But the Republicans in the Senate affirmatively blocked him. Remember, when Reagan won his massive landslide, he brought the Senate along with him. It was unexpected. One of the greatest popular election landslides and electoral election landslides in American history. Never seen anything like it. Still haven't ever seen anything like it. And you never will because of the change in demographics and so forth in the country. Donald Trump's landslide was a true landslide, but under different circumstances with a different population. It's the truth. But it was a massive landslide, Trump's victory. Now back to Reagan. I served in his administration for 8 years. One of the positions I held was as the principal deputy assistant secretary for elementary and secondary education. I've mentioned that in the past, distant past. Have I not, Mr. Producer? And what did we mostly do? We were a pass-through for money to states and localities, but we kept putting more and more requirements on it because the NEA and the AFT, what they couldn't get in local negotiating deals with local school boards or what they couldn't get out of state capitals, they'd come to the bureaucracy at the Department of Education in Washington to get federal mandates. What Reagan did, because his own Republicans in the Senate blocked him, and hopefully the Republicans in this Senate won't block Trump with his executive order reversing Carter's executive order. So he decided to have massive block grants where the vast majority of money that was rolling through the Department of Education for K through 12 will be sent in block grants to states and localities to spend as they sought fit with some very limited restrictions. President Trump still agrees with that, with what's left at the Department of Education. So many employees there and in these other departments really are completely unnecessary. Now, look, folks, Donald Trump didn't hide the ball. He said what he wanted to do. He said he wanted to slash government. He said he wanted to slash spending. He said he was all for tariffs. So even people who might disagree with him in the particulars, even if you do or I do, he said what he was going to do. And he was elected by a landslide on the basis of what he said. He's following up on what he said. He's following up on what he promises. Now step back and think about this. How do you cut the government without pissing off federal employees and their unions? How do you cut the government without ticking off the Democrat Party that's created 90% of this and is in their ideological DNA? How do you try and minimize, wrong word, how do you try to reduce and limit the power of the ruling class in Washington, D.C., because nobody's minimizing, but reduce it, and not tick off the media, which is part and parcel of that ruling class? You don't. And the federal judges, so many of them, mostly Biden and Obama appointees, but yes, some Republicans too. They seem to think their job is to protect these institutions, the bureaucrats, the waste, the fraud, the abuse, the bloat from a duly elected president and his administration that's trying to deliver on what they promised. So all this stuff you're hearing, all this criticism you're hearing are mostly, not exclusively, but mostly from the people who voted against Trump, who opposed Trump, who supported the other side. Again, there are individual instances where that's not the case, but in a macro sense, it absolutely is the case. So the same organizations, the same groups, the same media, the same guests in the media, the same government union bosses, and on and on and on, who desperately did everything they could to elect Kamala Harris and defeat Donald Trump, are out there trashing Trump. And, of course, getting all the media attention. You don't even hear from the people who actually support what Donald Trump is doing. You don't hear about the actual waste, fraud, and abuse, other than they're not going about it the right way. Like there's a right way. Nobody's ever done this before. There's no right way. There's no wrong way. There's only one way. You got to get it done. You can't play by Marcus and Queensberry rules when the other side's using brass knuckles. Subterfuge. Sabotage. When they're doing everything they can in Congress to disrupt hearings, to disrupt information that's presented to the American people. For those of you who have suffered, your children have suffered through the pandemic. For those of you who've attended local school board meetings and been treated like dirt. For those of you who believe your school system is out of control, that they don't respond to local parents and so forth anymore, this is a godsend. Because all these groups and people turn to the Federal Department of Education, don't they, for help? For help. This is a tremendous advance. It's tremendous progress for the cause of actual education, educating children. The Democrats will fight like hell for the education department. They'll fight like hell for the education department in Washington, D.C. They'll fight like hell for the two big public sector teachers unions who are massive contributors to them and man their precincts during the elections. They'll fight like hell for them. They fight against school choice. They fight against parental and child choice. They fight against anything that's not a government-run or government-controlled school. They do not care about children or education. That's right, I said it. I have fought this battle since I was 19 years old and elected to my local school board in Cheltenham Township, Pennsylvania, when I was in law school. It's the same battle. But now we have a president of the United States who literally is doing everything he can for the children of this country and their parents, for education. This is a major civil rights event. The Department of Education stands in the schoolway door, in the way of the school door, to prevent little kids who aren't getting educated, particularly in poor neighborhoods, from getting out and going to schools that are far superior, where there's no or fewer drugs and no or fewer crime. The president talks about liberation. This is a liberation day for education. It's not the only thing that needs to be done, but it is a big thing. It is a big thing. The new Secretary of Education, I salute you. And all the people who've been working on this, I salute them too. You and I, we're not going to cry over some massive bureaucracy. It's still going to be a massive bureaucracy, but just not as big.